Very good.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us. We can't hear you. You can't hear me at all? Not at all? Very, this happens. A little bit? A little bit better? Okay. Okay. Can everybody hear me in the back? No, not at all? Okay, is that any better?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna blame the person I did mic check, so that's definitely his fault. Okay, so good evening and thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Taylor and I'm the event assistant for McNally Robinson Booksellers here in Saskatoon. This event is being held on Treaty 6 territory, which is the land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and homeland of the Métis Nation. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Saskatoon launch of Paper Birds by Jeanette Lynes, published by HarperCollins Canada. Also joining us as a guest reader and conversation host is Kristine Scarrow. Thank you to Jeanette, Kristine, and HarperCollins Canada for working with us at McNally Robinson to make this event possible. Please note that it is being live streamed and be aware of the webcam to your right. I'd also like to take this time to encourage you to silence your phones for the duration of the event. If you would like to purchase Paper Birds, we have some up here on the signing table and also on the desk by where you first walked in. You're welcome to get your copy signed before you purchase it. Just please remember to stop by the cash desk on your way out. And now I'd like to introduce Kristine Scarrow. Kristine Scarrow is the author of 4 young adult titles, all published by Thistledown Press. She holds an MFA in writing from the University of Saskatchewan and was the 2022 to 2023 Saskatoon Public Library Writer in Residence. She teaches post-secondary and has just finished her latest young adult novel. She lives in Saskatoon. Thank you, Kristine. I'd also like to introduce Jeanette Lynes. The 4th novel is Paper Birds, published by HarperCollins Canada. Her 3rd novel, The Apothecary's Garden, was a finalist for a High Plains Book Award and shortlisted for 2 Saskatchewan Book Awards. Jeanette's 2nd novel, The Small Things That End the World, won the 2019 Fiction Award at the Saskatchewan Book Awards. Her 1st novel, The Factory Voice, was longlisted for the Giller Prize. Jeanette is also the author of 7 books of poetry. Her collection of personal essays, Apron Apocalypse, lyric essays, is forthcoming from Thistledown Press.
Okay, let's see here. Can you guys hear me okay back there? Awesome, thank you. Okay, so Jeanette asked if I would read some of my own work tonight, and I was quite reluctant to do so. I thought, how odd that I'm going to read my work at someone else's book launch, especially when all I want to do is talk about this extraordinary book. I asked her if I could read some of her work instead, and she insisted, no, I still need to read some of mine. And I suppose that's a great way to start this evening, is to show you just how special Jeanette is. When I was in the MFA in writing program, our cohort named Jeanette Captain. It was meant in a playful way that seemed to delight her, or she did a good job making it seem so. A captain is a powerful or influential person, the person in command, a supreme leader. But to be effective, they must provide safety and support to their crews. Jeanette has dedicated much of her life to supporting other writers, teaching them, mentoring them, and launching them into the world. When I was asked to be part of this evening, I felt so honored to be able to be part of something for her. Doubly exciting is that we get to discuss this magical book tonight. So on Jeanette's insistence, I will go ahead and read. Though, yeah, I can't wait to talk about the book that she's brought us tonight. So the story I'm going to read is a short story from actually my thesis, which was a short story collection while I was in the MFA and writing program, and it's titled A Mother's Love. After several months of coaxing, our son Matthew is bringing his girlfriend to Sunday dinner. I've put out the Royal Doulton, the individual salt and pepper shakers for each place setting, the silk runners. I've cooked lamb, which no one in this family really cares for, but I think it makes a good first impression. I expect that this girl has put forth the same kind of effort, but when Matthew comes through the front door, she's wearing black leggings and a shapeless tunic. They stride into the entry in their running shoes. It's Sunday dinner, remember? And they're laughing over the game of football they've just had in the neighborhood park. Don't even get me started on girls playing football. The girl holds Matthew's hands and stands just behind him as if he needs to provide cover in his own childhood home. Mom, Matthew says politely. He leans into me and kisses my cheek. His stubble needles at my cheeks. He's typically clean shaven. I prefer him that way. I wonder if this girl has influenced him to grow facial hair. Bill, they're here. Hello, dear. This is Bia. Matthew's mouth stretches wide. What kind of name is that anyhow? Beatrice sounds so much more put together, don't you think? He's smitten, there's no denying it. I note that he does not let go of Beatrice. The girl comes into better view. Her hair is snaking out of her ponytail, brown wisps that create a mane around her oval face. Her cheeks are tinged pink, likely from running, and she smiles as she stretches out her hand to me. Let's go sit, Matthew says, pulling Bia toward the living room. Bill and I follow them. Matthew sits on one end of the love seat and Bia sits right next to him so that there's almost a full seat beside her. They continue to hold hands so tight, I wonder if Matthew's scared that she'll blow away. So, I say, nice to see you both. You as well, Mum, Matthew nods. It's been a while. I try to sound warm, but it comes out clipped. You must be busy? Matthew squeezes Bia's hand. This girl is the best thing to have happened to me. My gut drops. I might as well fling myself off a high rise and careen to my end because I imagine this moment would feel the same, but no one notices the danger I'm in. Matthew leans into Bia and kisses her cheek. I find myself touching my own cheek in response, the whisper of my son on my skin. I think of how many times I've kissed his baby soft cheeks, how when he was a toddler, I'd blow raspberries in the crook of his neck and shoulder and his tummy. How his belly laugh would make me clutch my own stomach, happy tears pricking my eyelids. His pudgy hands, warm with sweat, would cut my cheeks. The time when I was his everything. Dinner's almost ready, I inform them. Why don't I get us some drinks, Bill says. He's jovial. He sees no problem with Matthew dating Bia or anyone for that matter. I find myself wanting a drink rather badly. I'll have a beer, Dad, Matthew answers. Bia will have one too. I check to see if Bia reacts to Matthew's choice for her, but she's studying my son's features with pure adoration. Did I mention they met at a bar? A bar is not the place to meet the love of your life. It started off innocently enough. My friend Donna from church had suggested we have our single children meet. Her daughter Elizabeth was a nice girl from the choir. She wasn't the most striking thing, mind you, but she was from good stock. She dressed modestly, which, have you seen the styles today? Ripped jeans, midriff-bearing tops, good grief. Donna and I were sure that our children would hit it off. I was bringing amazing genetics to the table. Matthew is as handsome as they come. He's tall and trim. He has remarkable gray eyes and a ready smile. His dark brown hair is thick and full. There will be no premature balding. His children will be beautiful, even if marred by the subpar looks of their future mother. Bill hands the kids their drinks. Would you like a glass? Bill, get them glasses. They don't want to drink out of a bottle. Mom, we're good, Matthew says, waving his hand at me to stop. I watch as Bia takes a swig as large as Matthew's and swallows it effortlessly. So Beatrice, I say, are you going to school? Do you work? We really don't know anything about you. Bia rubs the top of her beer bottle with the pad of her thumb. Her fingers start tugging at the label, leaving tiny bits of foil on her lap. I'm interested in holistic medicine. I'm currently working towards being a naturopath. She speaks so softly, I find myself craning forward. When I hear the words, I choke on my drink and pass it off as accidental. Bea looks down and sees the mess she's created on her lap. She works quickly to scoop up the torn pieces, but they are damp from the condensation on the bottle and they stick in wet clumps. The oven timer sounds, signaling dinner. Could everyone please take a seat? I'll bring the food. When I bring out the steaming dishes, a watercress soup, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted asparagus, and the braised lamb, Matthew has moved his place setting beside Bea. He laughs when he sees the meal. My face flames. We couldn't have just ordered pizza or something? This just seems like a little much. This is beautiful, Mrs. Johnson. Bea glances at the dishes. Thank you, Bea. I'm pleased that at least one person appreciates my efforts. Mom, what's in the potatoes? Is there milk in them? My eyebrows knit together. Cream. Why? I always put cream. Well, the thing is, Bea's vegan and gluten-free. Oh, for goodness sake, of course she is. She probably drinks turmeric shakes and eats charcoal ice cream too. I mentally dissect each dish and realize that nothing at the table is suitable for this girl. The steam pulses from the tops of the dishes, all carefully seasoned and placed in my holiday dishware. My jaw tightens. The potatoes in my mouth feel like dry lumps. This might have been something to share with me beforehand, Matthew, I say evenly. He nods. Yeah, I wasn't thinking. Sorry about that. Bea, I'm especially sorry to you. I'll make sure we stop at that cafe you like to go to. We can get dinner there. Dessert then. It's creme brulee and it should be fun. I used almond milk and cornstarch to thicken it. Bea's shoulders relax and she nods. That I can have. Bea takes a generous spoonful of the creamy custard and groans at the taste. I smile. 1 week later, after not receiving one call or text from Matthew, I leave a message on his voicemail. Hi, Matthew. It's your mother. I thought that maybe you and Beatrice could come for dinner again next weekend. We'd love to see you. This time, I know exactly what to serve. To my surprise, Matthew calls back. The following Sunday, I greet them at the door. This time, I reach for Beatrice and envelop her into a tight hug. If I'm friendly and warm to the terrified girl, they may come around more. She stands wooden, arms at her sides while I hug her. This time when Bill brings the drinks, I open the conversation with an article I saw in the newspaper about a shortage of family physicians taking new patients and how many citizens are without a regular family doctor, relying only on emergency clinics for their medical needs. Have you ever thought of being a real doctor? I asked Beatrice. It sounds like there's a lot of opportunity here. Matthew sets down his beer and folds his arms. Mom, he starts. No, I mean it. Why be a naturopath when you can be a real doctor and solve some of the problems in your community? Bea's eyes are wide. Mrs. Johnson, naturopaths do just as much healing as medical doctors do. It's a patient-centered approach. But the focus is on finding the root causes of illness instead of just treating symptoms. It goes beyond what a medical doctor does. In fact, many things can be self-healed with the right approaches, and it's done alongside modern medicine. I sip my wine, throw back my head, and laugh. Well, I'm not sure I'd go that far. If you think your little herbs and tinctures will help people, then you just go right ahead. I'm just saying I'll place my faith in a real doctor. I look Matthew in the eye. I'm surprised you believe in all this since you're going to real medical school. I look at Beatrice again. Matthew's wanted to be a surgeon since he was just a young boy. To have a son this talented is a blessing I still can't quite believe. I don't want to think that Beatrice is dating Matthew for his career path and the solid future it will afford them. But one must wonder when two people are as unevenly matched as they are. Nobody said I was going to medical school, Matthew interjects. Well, of course you are, I shake my head. Dad, will you tell her? Matthew puts his hands up. Tell me what, Bill? I turn to my husband, who has shrunk into his seat. He glances down at his beer like it's a life preserver. I think I'm going to art school. My laugh turns brittle and high-pitched. Matthew Johnson will not be attending art school. Me and Bea, we're thinking of opening a healing center with holistic services, and I can teach art there. My son's eyes are pleading with me to understand. I think of his cherubic face holding the Fisher-Price stethoscope to my chest, pretending to play doctor from the time he could walk. How he'd carry the plastic black bag filled with the make-believe medical supplies. I'd clutch at some part of my body and pretend to squeal in pain until he'd fix me. And when I'd announce that I was all better and that he'd saved me, he'd beam. We've got news, Matthew adds. My blood feels like it's coagulating and threatening to freeze in my veins. I've asked Bea to marry me and she said yes. The two of them hug and kiss. Bill sets down his beer and claps for them. He gives his son a high five and a bear hug. I feel myself pale. I think I'm smiling, but the room blurs. Once again, the oven timer sounds. This time I've made polenta with beans and greens. I'm certain it'll meet with Bea and Matthew's approval. I've even crafted another dessert. I direct everyone to the table again while I bring out the dishes. Bill opens a bottle of champagne and pours us all flutes of it for a toast to the newly engaged couple. Matthew and Bea fawn over the meal. Bea's more open and animated over dinner, as though she's finally found a way into the family that feels comfortable. Thank you so much, Mrs. Johnson, she gushes. I'm so touched by all the trouble you went through to make this meal for me. I nod and sip my wine. Even Matthew and I catch eyes. He winks at me. I'm not sure I've ever seen him so happy. Shall we have dessert? I ask. It'll just be a minute. The warm apple cobbler is resting on the stovetop. It's one of Matthew's favorites. The edges are crisp and the sauce is caramelized. I reach for the can of whipped cream in the refrigerator, but then think better of it. I want Bea to know that I'm thinking of her food intolerances. I grab spoons and the pretty crystal dessert bowls that Bill and I received as a wedding present 25 years ago. I want to look back on this moment and remember how it meant something. I set them on the table and return for the cobbler. I raise it to my nose and breathe in the smell of brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves. I realize there's one thing I forgot to do, one ingredient I've almost let slip. I take the yellow bin marked flour and tuck it behind the cupboard before anyone sees it and asks. The cobbler won't be the same if I make it with something else. Besides, an intolerance won't kill the girl. With my chin on my hands and bright eyes, I watch my son laugh as he wolfs down his cobbler. I think of him in his high chair, sticky face and hands after dessert, reaching for me. There's nothing purer than a mother's love. One day, Matthew will know how much I love him and the lengths I'd go to for him. Thank you. Yeah, make it your time. Everyone, please welcome Jeanette. You're really good at this. Oh, I was doing the wrong side.
Good evening, good evening. Hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me at the back? Yay, my goodness. Thank you all so much for coming. Hello, everybody out in YouTube. Hi, Mike. And thank you, everybody, just so much for coming. I'm really, I don't know, I'm just very moved. Colleagues, students, friends, my gosh, writers. This is really amazing. Thank you. About 20 years ago, maybe almost to the day, not quite, but Glenn Sorstad there drove me around Saskatoon to help me find an apartment, a place to live when I came to be writer in residence 20 years ago in 2005. And I just fell in love with this place and the writing community and I just always wanted to come back. So I got to come back and thank you, Kristine. That was a beautiful reading. And you were a remarkable MFA in writing student, and your whole cohort was remarkable. This cohort was all through COVID on Zoom, and yet they built these bonds and community, and they care for each other, and they all came here when we could travel and had a great big party at the end. So what a fabulous reading that was. And thank you so much with your teaching all over the place, all over the city, and yet you did this. Thank you for your generosity. And thanks again, everybody, for coming. Thanks, McNally Robinson. Thank you to Kristine again, HarperCollins, my editor, Janice Zwerbny. And I do mention it in the book, but I want to give a shout out to Sask Arts because a grant that I got from them enabled me to go to Bletchley Park in England and also to do some research over there in the archives. That was wonderful and helped a lot. So The Paper Birds is a novel set in World War II. This is set in 1943 for the most part. And it is about women who worked as codebreakers in World War II. It's set in Canada on the shore of Lake Ontario, and we'll get into this a little bit more. What was historical fiction is funny because it's like, well, which part is real and which part did you make up? So maybe we'll get into that a little bit more. I will say when I started working on this code breaking, cryptography, cryptanalysis, I thought, oh Lord, this is. When we think of code breaking, we think of computers and numbers and code language and Alan Turing and the Enigma. And I just very quickly realized, no, I don't really do numbers. So the more I researched, I found that there's this whole other linguistic side to code breaking, like huge amount of language, linguistics, morphology, and that was just a wonderful thing to discover. So definitely you'll know that I have leaned into a realm that I'm very comfortable in. And it was a really huge part also of code breaking, the whole kind of language side of it, even though we generally think of computers and numbers. So it's 1943. I'll just read 3 short excerpts. The protagonist is a 19-year-old girl named Gemma Sullivan. She just finished high school and she wants to get a job and gets called in for an interview, and unbeknownst to her, she thinks it's an office job. Unbeknownst to her, the job involves working as a code breaker. Her boss, it's a small operation. There's 4 young women working there, and their boss, who's a pretty fierce intellect. She's a lady mathematician. Remember, it's 1943. She's a tad eccentric. She wears fuzzy bedroom slippers when she's, racking her brain, cracking codes. They're breaking codes in the basement of a house, which has the government's taken over for purposes of intelligence work in World War II. Her name is Beatrice Fearing, and it's a very hot summer in 1943. So they're working in this sweaty basement trying to break these codes. So here's a brief scene from the job interview. And I don't know why I remember all the job interviews I've had so well. I just remember how we've all had them, how stressful they are. So we have Miss Fearing here interviewing Gemma Sullivan in the summer of 1943. Here we work with language and numbers. Can you give me an example of a code, Miss Sullivan? Her hands damp with sweat, Jem ventured. A telephone number, maybe? Miss Fearing leaned forwards, looming closer to Jem. Everything is a code, she began. Stars in the night sky, the camber of a swallow's wing, a soldier's wink, Mayday, the color blue, a pulse, a gong, a chime, a poem. 7 short blasts from a ship's horn, a musical score, slashes of paint on a cave wall, a stained glass window, a white flag, bloomers pegged to a wash line, sorrowed with coal soot, grayed, unrequited, and bells, always bells. A shriek between jaws, a bone, a heart, column of smoke from a fire. She paused, for effect, Jem supposed. Then more. Dip, dot, dot, dash, Ave Maria, Wilco, a girl riding a bicycle, her hand signaling a turn, a raven's swoop near your shoulder, some consider a sign from a departed one. The messages contained in our cells that scientists are only now starting to discover. We're living codes. So the whole world is a code, infinitely much more abundant than a mere phone number. Gemma didn't sense a question here, so she pressed her damp palms together as if in prayer. Miss Fearing looked straight at Jem. What do you think this war's most important weapon is, Miss Sullivan? A lake gull mewled out in the summer day. How Jem wished its cry held the answer. She fumbled again. Guns? Miss Fearing's lips flattened. Intelligence, information. A million signals whiz through the air on any given day. She paused as if to reflect. All this is so simple yet so complex. She went on. We are trying to get supply ships over to Britain through the perilous shark-filled waters of the Atlantic. The sharks are German submarines, U-boats, but they too need supplies, fuel. A couple of months ago, thanks to work like ours, our ships dodged numerous U-boats. This work takes grit. Do you possess grit, Miss Sullivan? Jem honestly didn't know and said as much. This interview is really, really long. So I'm going to skip ahead and excerpt just another little bit from it. They talk about all kinds of scientific things and whatnot. Miss Sullivan, stay present, please. Let's return to your strengths. Tell me more about your language skills. What do you excel at in this area? Reading, composition. I wrote a few pieces for the Peptimist, our school paper. Good, your teacher told me as much, but I must test your aptitude for language to verify this. The fuzzy feet sloshed over to a screen on a roller that lowered from the ceiling like the large maps in geography class. Even the noisy, decrepit fan couldn't smother the officious snarl made by the heavy sheet of paper as Miss Fearing pulled it down, then snapped it into place. It was filled with words printed in a magnified typeface, legible from some distance. Read out loud what you see, Miss Sullivan. Jem cleared her throat and began. Alas, poor Yorick! I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. He hath borne me on his back 1,000 times, and now how abhorred in my imagination it is. She paused for breath. Since she wasn't likely to get this job, and was in fact a dunce who couldn't tell a snowflake from a doily, she'd go down with a flourish of drama. Continue, please, Miss Fearing urged. Jem ratcheted up the emotion, injecting anguish into her delivery. My gorge rises at it. Here hung those lips that I have kissed I know not how oft. Where be your jibes now, your gambols, your songs, your flashes of merriment that were wont to set the table on a roar? She'd reached the end of the words on the screen and was surprised to see Miss Fearing scoot a tear from her eye. I sense you know this passage you've just read with such expressive conviction. Hamlet, Act 5, Scene 1. Correct. Your delivery reveals a literate person with performative dexterity, intuition in human psychology, and a precise eye for detail. You stumbled not once. We studied the play in English class, Jem explained, not wishing to appear boastful. Then Miss Fearing asked Gemma to scramble the words and phrases and reconstitute the passage whilst maintaining its overall gist. Jem didn't find this difficult. After all, I knew him, bore the same import as him I knew, and Shakespeare's phrasing often held up backwards as well as forwards. She scrambled, she juggled like a word puzzle, voicing her new configuration. Miss Fearing seemed pleased. Then she slid a small book across the desk to Jem. Open it at page 137 and read Emily Dickinson's poem numbered XLIV. Gemma found the page. She read, waited. Well executed, Miss Sullivan. Can you decode this poem? Do you know what it means? Jem quivered with nerves, so much hung in the balance of her answer. She sighed and thought she'd better be honest. I'm sorry, I can't make head or tail of it. Instead of the dismay Gemma expected, Miss Fearing laughed, a single wallop of drollery. Neither can I, Miss Sullivan. What a shame Emily Dickinson can't return from the dead. She'd be wondrous as a codebreaker. So I'll just read one more quick excerpt. So there are 4 young women who work in the code-breaking office, and they're all fairly different. They were deliberately hired because they had different skills. So Gemma is sort of the word girl. Coraline Ponder, also called Ponder the Wander. She's an absolute math whiz, and she's also quite a diva. Then there's a grounded Hester Hobbs, who has good skills in logic. And then there's the ringer they bring in, Ada Swift, who's glamorous and has a kind of other job doing spycraft across the city at Casa Loma. And you probably know that that really was happening during World War II. In the basement of Casa Loma, they were making all kinds of stuff for spies. So Ada Swift works there part of the time and then is brought in to help the codebreakers some of the other days. So to get out of the sweaty, steamy, oppressive, hot basement office where they're racking their brains, at lunch they go out and sit by the lake on a little strip of sand. And the boss, they've been having trouble cracking codes. So the boss has told them they need to kind of collaborate more, help each other, you know, don't be so siloed. So they're trying to do this. And this is a scene at lunch. The boss is basically saying, come on, you got to work together. This is a tough one. Lakeside lunches were less lively on the days Ada Swift worked at Casa Loma. Hester sat sullen on the log, still reeling, Jem supposed, from the dressing down Miss Fearing had given her. Cora Lynn smoked a menthol cigarette and gazed out at the lake. There was no reason for Jem to sneak away to the prisoner of war camp now, though she still worried about the cat. She glanced along the log at Cora Lynn. Their boss had directed them to meld with each other's psyches. Jem shuddered. She couldn't imagine what went on in Cora Lynn's brain, the formulae she plugged away at, filled that chalkboard. Jem didn't see how any meeting of minds, hers and Ponder the Wander's, could ever happen. Why do you like numbers so much, Cora Lynn? Mathematics, I mean, Jem asked. The Wander blew minty smoke out over the sand. This question seemed to throw her off, but only for a few seconds. Looking at Jem, square on, Cora Lynn answered, numbers are precise. Numbers don't lie. Few things are more elegant than a well-rendered formula. Math is a distillation so pure, so beautiful. I'd give anything to have known Ada Lovelace, Roger Coates, Leonhard Euler, whose famous equation taps into the very essence of life, equal to the greatest work of art. And someday, if I can continue my studies, I'd love to devise an equation of my own. This seemed a day for speeches, and certainly this was more than Cora Lynn usually said to Jem in one sustained chain of smoke. Whereas words, Cora Lynn went on, are murky, with gaps in interpretation you can drive a lorry through. Words mislead, dissemble. When it comes to falsehoods, words propagate faster than rabbits. Word people like you, Jem, and sometimes you, Hester, traffic in semantics which are sloppy. Number people like me deal with symbols which are purer forms. I'm closer to Ada Swift. We're both steeped in magic. My version of magic is ciphers that use algorithms to transform symbols. Hester yawned. But words can be symbols too, Jem thought. She didn't have the nerve to challenge Cora Lynn. Jem sensed she'd lose. That girl's mind dwelt on some higher plane Gemma's would never reach. How could she ever be comrades with their resident word hater? But just then Jem's stubborn streak reared its head. Not all words are lies, Jem protested. Many are not. Cora Lynn seemed not to hear. Breaking out of her funk, Hester interjected. And measurements can be wrong, Cora. There can be inaccuracies, misfires, miscalculations, misconstrued angles, flawed ratios. Your system is far from perfect, clever britches. Well, yes, mistakes happen, made by dullards, snapped Cora Lynn. Gemma couldn't fathom how they were supposed to get inside each other's minds. So inured they were, each to her silo. They were far from compatible. She could only hope that Ada Swift would exercise some sort of leveling effect. The sound of the bell reached them, needing no pencil, paper, numbers, or words to tell them that lunch was over. And thank you for listening. So Kristine and I are going to have a conversation now. Okay. Oh,
Hey, thank you, everybody. I thought maybe Jeanette would get a kick out of this, but when I was reading her copy, I would flag all the pieces, all the parts that I wanted to ask her about. And I think when I showed it to her tonight, she was a little overwhelmed. But there were so many interesting things in this book that I found really unique that I hadn't read about before. And so I was captivated by especially the level of research I think that this book entailed. And like I said, just all of these unique things that I'd never read about. And so because this book is so unique, Jeanette, I'm curious, what brought you to this idea?
Well, I seem to be obsessed with World War II for a number of years, and certainly women's work in general, and women's work in World War II. In some ways, this is a very belated sequel to my first novel, The Factory Voice, which was about women who built warplanes in World War II in Northern Ontario. Somehow the books got out of sequence, and this should have maybe been a sequel to that one, but it didn't happen that way. So well, you know, different things. I mean, the last 4 or 5 years or so, there has been more media coverage of these women who actually did work as codebreakers in World War II. There was, I think, Leona, I think you sent me quite a feature biography of a woman who was working up in Ottawa at the examination unit who had passed away, and she was apparently a brilliant codebreaker. So these ladies were getting well on in years, so they were starting to be interviewed by the media, and there's just been sort of this general resurgence of interest in the topic. I mean, I think the whole, you know, Bletchley Park, the Imitation Game movie, maybe you've seen that. A lot of spin-off Bletchley Park novels, and the TV series Bletchley Circle, I think it was. But that all that's in England, you know. So there wasn't much in Canada. There's been some American coverage of this. I mean, a lot of that intelligence stuff wasn't declassified until, you know, the 1970s, and the women who worked as codebreakers, of course, had to sign an oath of secrecy. So, you know, it's just sort of one of those things that's kind of been emerging over the last few years. And I guess that the Bletchley Park whole kind of thing got people really interested in it as well. I mean, I saw The Imitation Game, and I'm just like completely, you know, just blown away by all that, and touring Bletchley Park. My goodness, that was incredible.
Yeah. Well, I heard you mention the Official Secrets Act. So we learn in the book that code breaking requires the women to sign the Official Secrets Act, and so if they violate the act by revealing any information, they risk being fined, imprisoned, or both. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So this was passed way back in 1890, I believe, and still exists under a different name today. Yeah.
Right. The version or the iteration of it I used as basis for this story was the Official Secrets Act of 1939, the Canadian one, and you can read that all online. It's incredible how much research you can get just from online. So yeah, the Canada's Official Secrets Act of 1939. It's all there, and yeah, that's just, you know, pretty scary stuff. Like they were serious about these, you know, these punishments and fines, and you could go to jail, huge amounts of money for the fines for that time, you know. So that was very sobering to read that. I confess I didn't know about that. So they all had to sign this act, and most of these women who were interviewed later they were told to say they worked as stenographers or file clerks or something like that. They didn't even, apparently, by all accounts, even tell their family what they did all day. And I'm sort of obsessed with secrecy anyway, because kind of a secretive person a little bit. And so I thought, wow, that'd be so weird when you meet somebody, they say, so what do you do? And you just say, well, but what if you had to constantly just make stuff up and you could never say what you did all day? I think that would be very bizarre.
Well, and of course, what happens throughout the book is like, there are spies around trying to catch somebody who maybe is, against them and not part of the allies. And so all of the characters in the book kind of don't know who to trust at any given turn when they meet somebody, right? So you really experience that. Yeah.
Yeah, the house, the cottage, the house that this in the story that the office is based on, it was an actual house on the shore of Lake Ontario during World War II, and the government thought the man who owned it was a spy, so they actually rounded him up and locked him away, and then took over the house for intelligence work. The novel had a prologue all about what you were talking about, sort of paranoia, and the psychology of it all. Like, what if the milkman could be a spy? The grocer could be a spy, and who can I trust and who can I talk to? And I worked very hard in this prologue about this sort of everyday life, how that paranoia might get into your head in everyday life. But my editor said, prologues are out. No prologue. Cut. So I was quite disappointed because I worked very, very hard on it. And the writers in the room will appreciate it. I'm trying to sneak it into my book of essays, though. I really don't want to work so hard on it. But yeah, I'm interested in the psychology of secrecy and private information. A paper by a law professor, a recent paper, I think, at the University of Windsor, he did this academic study of state secrets. And he seemed to be arguing that people who signed these waivers of, oaths of secrecy seem to, for the most part, uphold them. I mean, not just because of the punishment, but because of the idea of being a citizen.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense. So you referred to this branch where the women work. It's called the cottage, right? And in the book, it's often referred to by other people in the field as the lipstick bureau or the hen house. So the women, even the office there, receives the broken cast-offs of the office furniture from the fancier branches. So we get the sense that we are definitely rooting for underdogs in the book and what these women are doing. Women of this time were stifled by many social constructs at the time, which we see on many levels in the book. And Miss Fearing, the boss, she also makes reference about this because of the relationship that she's in. In fact, all of the women in some way, shape, or form make reference to this. Can you tell us more about that and how all of these women's journeys played into the social constructs at the time?
Right. Well, I mean, I have done a fair bit of research, sort of social history more in the war period, both World War I and World War II. And I mean, no one will be surprised to know that there was a good deal of sexism, and Miss Fearing is a bit of a firebrand, a bit of a feminist. In real life, in Ottawa, at the examination unit, which was on Laurier Avenue and Whitby, Ontario, so-called Camp X, there were some women working there, but it was, there just was a lot of sexism happening. I'm reading again about the Canadian Women's Army Corps in the 1940s for a different project, and they had to really fight to convince the men that they could make a contribution, so yeah, I guess it's that, and it's definitely an underdog story. Like, when we think of code breaking now, because of the Imitation Game and Alan Turing and Bletchley Park, I think we think of these, big, huge computers like Enigma, and like they're, that stuff's all really incredible. Camp X had Hydra, That was a huge radio tower thing. But what if you just had like a paper and pencil? You know, that's part of like, what if you went like lo-fi? What if you went like analog instead of digital? What if you just counted on your, they didn't have any artificial intelligence. That was real intelligence. What if you just had to count only on your wits? So it's kind of playing with that kind of idea. And yeah, they are in a kind of underdog situation, yes.
Yeah, and each of the women, like you had alluded to in the reading and in the explanation, they come with such unique talents. And so how did you come to that of choosing these characters and what they were each going to bring to the table and how that was going to work?
Right. Well, as I think I alluded to, I very quickly gave up on the notion of even trying to learn anything remotely rudimentary about computer language or codes or math. I mean, I failed math in grade 10. That was it, right? But then the more I researched, the more I did see that there was this whole huge element of language involved. In Bletchley Park, when they were recruiting codebreakers, for the first phase of it, they recruited out of mostly like Oxford and Cambridge, but they recruited a lot of language people, a lot of linguists, a lot of people who studied morphology, the shapes of words, and obviously people who knew were German and Japanese. And so a lot of language people were at in that operation as well. Then I found out about Leo Marx, the fellow who worked for the British British Intelligence Bureau, and Leo Marx wrote code poems. And I love that. I grew very fascinated with Leo Marx's code poems. And you could just pick a poem, like a Shakespeare sonnet, and use that, but they might figure it out. So Leo Marx wrote his own poems, and he applied codes to them. And how did this go? The sender and the receiver both had to memorize the poem, and then there was a key. And by some algorithm, see what I mean? I out of my depth already, right? But there was a key by which they could decode the poem. And there's quite a famous poem that Leo Marx wrote that was a code. The life that I have is all that I have, and the life that I have is yours. Like it's all over the internet, even though I wasn't allowed to quote it. So the code poem thing really caught my interest. And wait, there's this whole language side. I love that. And also when they interviewed people for Bletchley Park, apparently one of the questions they would ask somebody if they're going to come and work at Bletchley Park was, so do you like crossword puzzles? So this whole word thing, I read a lot of the diaries and things of people who worked at Bletchley Park, and they seem to be, unless they're sort of constructing this mythology of themselves, but they seem to be a bit nutty. And they loved Lewis Carroll, like Jabberwocky and all that, right? I think you could get why Codebreaker might love something like Jabberwocky. They absolutely loved Lewis Carroll. So I just really enjoyed the whole language side of this. I looked at a course syllabus at New York University on elementary cryptography. Oh, is that hard?
Well, to illustrate some of that cryptography, I actually wrote some stuff here. So I want to read it so that I get it right and I don't mess up Jeanette's beautiful words. But Miss Fearing, the boss, she says that what the women do involves heavy doses of negative capability, that code breaking often feels like groping in the darkness for a tiny wedge of light, a crack of illumination, frequently flying by the seats of our hunches, prevailing through uncertainty. So the process of deciphering a code is explained many different times within the book, like how the letter written stands for something else, and then how there are nulls or duds that are used within them to throw by the enemy to throw them off, right? And so we learn it's throughout the story that it's a long and tedious and frustrating process that almost feels impossible. One other thing was crossword puzzles do play a large part in the book in another way. And so I was curious, are you a lover of crossword puzzles?
Oddly, I'm not that good at them, although I know some people watching who are very, very good at them. They're okay.
Okay. One person we haven't talked about yet tonight is another character in the book called Wren. And Wren is actually Gemma's aunt, who she affectionately calls Birdie. And Wren has actually essentially raised Gemma when she's lost her parents. And so she plays a central part in the book as well. And she's a very, very interesting character. She's patient, kind, supportive. She has her own impressive talents as a milliner, which is maker of hats, so very cool. And yet she gives herself very little credit in the book. She has a hard time accepting any good thing that happens to her. And so she's very endearing, and I was really rooting for Wren throughout the story. And I want to ask, how do you hope that readers perceive Wren?
Oh, thank you for that. I did want to have an older woman in the story. And that character, Wren, is partly to sort of try to carry over the trauma from World War I, because Wren's sweetheart, her fiance, was killed in World War I, and she never really got over the grief of it. So I've sort of thought, like, what, you know, the history sort of being like in these waves, kind of intergenerational kinds of waves. So and Wren's story is I had fun writing an older character. One of my favorite novels in the world has a 90-year-old woman, The Stone Angel by Margaret Lawrence. Wren's is a story of second chances, you know. So gee, I mean, could I possibly find love in my 70s? And is my optometrist flirting with me, or is he just adjusting my eyeglasses? And you know,
She's so endearing, like just
well, you know, I think I was a little bit of maybe my mother, and you know, writers also, we also talk to the dead when we write. There's a bit of my mother in there. And when Wren says something like the 1939 Canadian National Exhibition, they had all these new gadgets and modern things and food and things, and when Wren says they had a first time an ice cream sandwich, and she says, ice cream and a sandwich, ha 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 ha. That's exactly the kind of thing my mother would have said, you know. So yeah, I enjoyed her, and that's another love. There's more than one love story, and that is one of them. But she was somebody who suffered grief for years at the loss of her fiance in the First War.
And it's so endearing to see her in what she's trying to figure out. Is this a relationship? And can I say this first? She's sitting in it, she's on a car ride with them, and the poor thing, her hair is thinning, and she's very self-conscious about it. And so they end up, he pulls up in a convertible. And of course, then her hair is like being caught up in the wind, and she fears that when she's done, it's like quite the sight, and she's very embarrassed. And just watching her go through the motions of you know, feelings for this gentleman, and not being sure whether or not he quite feels them back, or if she's misreading, and just being on that journey. It's just, oh, like, yeah, Wren had my heart.
Thank you. My characters come by their social awkwardness, honestly.
So there's some guesses by the women about why their boss, Miss Fearing, refers to them as paper birds. We're never really told exactly why. There's some guesses, like, is it a name given for levity? Like one character suggests, is it because the women feel that they need to fight to stay relevant? As a different character suggests. And then I guess I want to ask, like, what does the name signify? Or do you intentionally leave that open for interpretation?
Right. Well, I mean, these young women are drowning in paper day after day, so there is that. It was meant to signify to some degree ephemerality, because, you know, as everybody knows, after the war, the guys came back, and the women were then expendable, and almost all of them, lost their jobs. So it's something very ephemeral. I mean, if it rains, something made of paper isn't going to last very long. But there's also a lot of birds through this. One thing at Bletchley Park that was amazing was there's it's a huge place, and they do a really marvelous tour. I don't usually like this sort of thing, but I loved it. There's this one whole part of Bletchley Park, thank you. This one whole part of Bletchley Park was devoted to the carrier pigeons in the war. That was awesome. Like a beautiful display. One carrier pigeon got like the Victoria Cross or something. Like they flew like hundreds of miles, and they had these little tubes on their legs with messages and stuff. So I hate pigeons here in Saskatoon. They're the scourge of my existence. But the carrier pigeons in the war, I was just so deeply moved by it. So in an earlier draft, and I'll make this really quick, in an earlier draft, I'm a romantic. So I had the love interest, he has to go away. And Gemma doesn't know if she's ever going to see him again. But these carrier pigeons start landing in her backyard and leaving like notes that tell her that he's still alive, he's still thinking of her. And I researched it quite a lot. Like they could fly up to 300 miles a day. And I researched how the hell did they know where to do the drop, right? But I found all that out, and I had written quite an extensive part with all these carrier pigeons, blah, blah, blah. And the editor said, Jeanette, no, you can't have the carrier pigeons. And I said, really? But it's so romantic. And she said, no. So I'm sorry. I know you really like them, but they have to go. So one way or another, I was going to get birds in here. But it is mostly a reference to the kind of just ephemeral, like the kind of fleeting ephemeral nature of this intense period of their lives. And yeah, the pigeons didn't make it into the final.
Each character has experienced a lot of grief and loss in each of their own ways, for sure. Yet we see that they possess a grit about them and determination, right? That life is still worth living and worth fighting for. And I guess, what do you hope readers take away from this book with that?
Yes, pleasure, entertainment, maybe learn a little bit about the history of the era. And I think it's really important to have all kinds of stories. I couldn't write dystopian fiction. I would just get too depressed. So instead I write romance. And I guess, is there time for little questions from the audience? Sort of, one?
Maybe one.
Anybody have a question? David Carpenter.
Yes,
And then Laura, yes.
I've heard a great deal about the subject matter of your novel, and I fear that a few people here might think that they have to wade through all kinds of weird theories about numbers and language and things like that. But what impressed me even more than your erudition is the way you take all this material and the novel moves forward in a way that is very hard to put down. And then do you teach your students things about fluence and how they keep a novel moving forward? Because you do a great job of it.
Well, thank you so much. And that's one reason why the carrier pigeons had to be jettisoned. Well, I guess we do talk about propulsion in fiction. We talk a lot about cutting stuff out, which tends to help with momentum. So yeah, I mean, a lot of that comes through the revision too, but I really appreciate that question, Dave. And Laura, we'll give you the last word.
I'm just wondering about a code in the book that you were excited about, some uncoding that was, and what was at the center of it. If there's a little tiny story about, how the poetry works into, Does that make sense or?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank
okay,
you.
okay.
Well, there is a thing about how the poetry works in, that it'll be a spoiler if I
Okay.
tell you that. I did figure some things out though, like the monosyllabic codes, polysyllabic codes, and frequency analysis. I can tell you exactly in order which letters in the English language are appear most frequently, which ones in the German language appear. So there's one little part where I actually I'm proud to say, did figure it out despite my lack of conceptual skills. Thank you. And I think just thanks everybody for listening. And Kristine,
Yeah, thank
those are
you.
wonderful questions and thank you again. And I think I can sign some books and thank you very much, Taylor. And everybody can come in.